promote the business of real estate. However, we have seen a lot of situations related to what happened with the real estate because we have a big number of Americans, in this case, going to Mexico to invest and to participate living there. We have different trends in this situation. People who is retired for traditionally has been a very good place for retirement in Mexico. Until late the 90s, this was mainly the big population that we had. After that, we have started to have another kind of population because of Americans moving to Mexico, because we were expanding with the NAFTA first and then now the USMCA treaty about the free trade agreement. We start to receive different kind of people, businessmen, managers, engineers, many people going to invest or representing the investment of companies there in Mexico. Then, more recent, on the last, let's say, 10 years, 15 years, we have started to see people who go to live there in Mexico because comparison the price of living here, as Michael was saying here California is quite expensive. Going to Mexico, it's make more cheaper that way. Houses not necessarily has to be cheaper. Houses have more or less the same value, but the normal living expenses in groceries, gasoline, transportation, even, I don't know, since they receive many of their income here from the US, they don't pay taxes really in Mexico. Then it is something that they are having a big opportunities there. And with after the COVID, that a lot of people start to work home office, they understand that they can go work with internet, a nice internet, working from their home in the beach, having a pina colada, and all of that. Yes, but it happens a lot. But people, and still there are people going there. However, I don't know, there are some problems sometimes regarding what happened going to live and invest in properties in Mexico. Because many people think, okay, Mexico is a very friendly country, we are neighbors, we are, let's say, California, we have a common heritage, we are more or less, I don't know how many of you know a Mexican, most probably at least you know one Mexican living here in California. I don't know, maybe. But everybody, I don't know, thinks, okay, Mexico is a friendly country. However, when we're talking about real estate and living investment, it has some tricky questions. I see that you are talking later about what happened with the investment in the Baja South, about near the seaside. And then, okay, they need to go to a different process of buying directly the properties because they need to go to, I don't know, legal figure. It is a trust. A trust that's more or less somehow, let me make a comparison, not really exactly a living trust like the one here you have in the US, but you can go and make a trust and then you can acquire your house there. And with the prices, you can buy from what its average house, maybe $600, $600,000 here, you can buy a very nice house near the sea and a nice place. And if you go inside Mexico, not really near the sea, like many people, maybe some of you maybe know San Miguel de Allende, Guadalajara, and some other places, you can find for this $600,000 good houses, sometimes bigger, more comfortable than what you can find for the same price here in the US. Then that's why, well, we are having really, there is a flow of Americans going to live in Mexico. Here, when I was invited here, they asked me, okay, so we have an investment program as an investor of a house. No, but it is allowed and it is considered at the immigration level. If somebody has already buy a house, they can do it. However, when we are talking about going near the seaside by a trust, it became sometimes a little tricky about how they can prove that they have invested in that situation. That's why it is not easy sometimes to have this situation. It is something that you need to face, you understand, and maybe you will need to find a lawyer, you need to find a good advisor to give you, okay, how you have to manage the situation, because we have seen several bad experiences. Today, in fact, I had to deal with a very bad experience. Somebody who went buy a house in Playa del Carmen in Cancun, and they bought the house 5 years ago, and still they haven't been able to receive and to see anything of that house. Then they spent a lot of money, and then they were checked. I don't know. This is something that maybe they don't get they got the best legal advice. They never explain what are the possibilities. In fact, today I have to spend, I don't know, maybe 2 hours talking with the legal advisor there in Mexico, because it is something that needs to be addressed clearly. They were, I don't know, at the beginning they were shocking because we couldn't help them really at the consulate, but at least they got some guidance from our side to what they can do. Then it is something that you need to be aware about the situation, trying to understand that there are regulations very different from what happens here. Here, let's say if you buy a house with one river or one small pond, that water belongs to you. But in Mexico, that water doesn't belong to you. It belongs to Mexico, and you have to get permission to extract the water from that well or something. It is something that you need to be aware of, that particular situation that you have to see. What other things that you can see, it is what status you can be. You have to decide, and you have to understand how you will be in Mexico, you want to be, because a lot, as I say, still there is a big number of Americans that they are going, let's say, to spend maybe the winter, because the winter there in Mexico is more mild than what happened in some parts of the U.S. We were talking here at the beginning that that many people from California, well, California has in general a very nice weather, a very nice. But if you're coming from Oregon, you come from Washington State, well, the weather in Mexico, it is very friendly year-round. Then it is something that you can see and you can decide, okay, I go and spend winter in Mexico, coming on summer, then do I need to get a resident? That's to decide. In Mexico, you can be as a visitor for 180 days every time you go and visit without any, just showing your passport, maybe showing sometimes a credit card at the immigration checkpoint, and then you are in, you can leave, you can remain there, buying everything. Sometimes you have to face some particular regulatory issues, like somebody will ask for a number somehow near or close what it is the Social Security, which is, we call it the curve. But even in that case, in this situation, when you are a visitor, you can go to the immigration, apply for a number. They can give you a number for 6 months, valid for 6 months, and you can start, because sometimes you need it for taxes. When you buy the house, you need to pay the taxes for the property house. You want to buy a car, maybe they will ask for this number, but you can get it, and maybe you can renew it easily, going and so. The other time, it is the time at the time of buying. Sometimes they ask for this kind of number for the taxes, but you can go and get from the equivalent of the IRS. You can get it from the SAT, a number that you can pay the taxes for the property. And the problem is when you have to sell it. In that case, it is really bad, because you have to pay a very high rate, because as a foreigner, you will not be entitled to have the deductions that are permitted to Mexicans. That's something that you have to be aware of that situation. The other part that they are asking me is if you can bring your dependents. Your dependents, according with our law, should be your child, could be your parents, sometime, well, of course, your spouse, it will be your sometimes they are asking, okay, can I bring my brother who is 35 years, okay, as a dependent? Well, no, that's not permitted. No, sometimes it happens very often. You cannot imagine. I was Deputy General Director of Immigration in Mexico, and I found a lot of people asking, okay, can I bring my dependent? Okay, sometimes I found somebody who wants to bring sorry to say, it's a maid from Philippines, say, she's my dependent. Okay, no. That's a problem. That's a big problem that we have to face. That's why we narrow the economic dependency to direct family line. And also, all depends restricted in case of the descendant to a certain age. Minors, of course, 18 years old, or if they are.
I can tell it's a very diverse group, so truly thank you for having me. I do have a slide you can take a look at as I'm speaking, but as introduced, my name is Madeline Knoll. I serve as the policy manager for the Downtown Sacramento Partnership. I've been there for about 1.5 years, and we're a not-for-profit organization, and I like to say that in policy, I'm kind of like that in-between space on the public side and the private side, and I'm the convener in between. I come from housing. My family was in development, and I worked throughout my high school and college getting some work experience. And then when I graduated college in 2011, I moved to Sacramento, got my real estate license, and just started shadowing all of the ins and outs of development. We had one project that was actively under construction. It just had really bad timing and stalled significantly due to the recession. And I got to work on that project, but it took many, many years to complete. The project on the right was one that was many years in the making, but we never actually got to move forward with it, never got to break ground, and ended up having to walk away from it. So I recognized from that experience the challenges, the complexities of bringing housing to market, and it carried with me throughout my career with other local developers and now in policy. So that's a little bit about me. I'm so grateful to have worked with housing creators in our community and to be a part of the positive growth that's taking place in Sacramento, because we're one of the fastest growing cities in the state. And I'm so excited I love being a transplant. I was joking with my group that I'm from San Diego and I'm the only San Diegan who loves Sacramento. But as far as those housing creators that are here in our jurisdiction, we are making some good progress with our housing goals. We were the first city in the state to receive the pro-housing designation, and we are outproducing our peers as far as new construction starts. But we have to recognize with the graph on the right that we're drastically far behind as far as our actual target goals for the regional housing needs. And I like to say that, from the policy side, we need to take some drastic measures, and we need to collaborate aggressively between the private side and the public side. Otherwise, to meet our crisis, we're really not going to get there with that radical change. So there's more work to be done, and that's what I'm here to do with the Downtown Partnership and with all of you and our housing creators, is bring more housing into our region, but specifically bring more housing into downtown. So I'll tell you why. So let's start there. Why downtown? Why do we want housing downtown, and why now? I'm sure it comes as no surprise that in 2020, we hit a bit of an inflection point, a little bit of a turning point, turning everything upside down, because downtown, and like most downtowns, Sacramento being no different, we were the major employer for the region, obviously a backbone of state workers. And overnight, we had no one coming into our district. Going from a 9 to 5, Monday through Friday thing to nothing was exposing all of our vulnerabilities as far as being a one-dimensional system. And flash forward to where we are now, we have definitely made some great progress, but people are always asking, how's downtown, and are you back to 2019? And that's a really good question. We do track data. We look at cell phone analytics, pretty terrifying stuff, but it tells us when you're coming into our district, and it'll tell us if you're a resident, if you're a visitor, or if you're an employee. And we can look at the data pre-2020, back in 2019 and 2018, and look at those trends. We can also see heat maps. We can see where people are coming into our district. These are some primary demand drivers, and it tells us how long you're staying there. And I wish I could go into more of this detail tonight, but my point is we've realized since the pandemic that the success formula for the future for all downtowns is going to look drastically different than what it looked like pre-2019. You know, obviously going from a one-dimensional office district to now transforming into more of a 24/7, you know, housing, retail, amenities for everyone. There's always going to be a disruption in the market, and whether that's telework or AI, we need to diversify, bring in different types of uses, and really redefine what a downtown neighborhood is. But I want to point out that housing downtown is not just like a downtown specific play. It's actually much more of a regional sustainable play. And it's sustainable fiscally, it's sustainable environmentally, it's more sustainable socially. You know, when we're having the highest housing crisis that we have to ask those hard questions of where is the sustainability and where are we going to make the biggest change as far as housing, and that's downtown. Because what we want to do is build upon the existing infrastructure that most downtowns already have in place, and that's public transportation, walkable streets, and mixed-use neighborhoods. So we want to look at those as the value proposition to solve a lot of the things that we're facing as a state. Affordability. We can actually engineer affordability into your pockets by this location efficiency in the day-to-day lifestyle. We can strengthen cities' revenues through the density of tax generation. We can reduce vehicle dependence, reduce emissions, and improve our climate goals. And we can create diverse, inclusive social spaces where social interactions can happen spontaneously, they can happen naturally, and they can happen right outside your door. So this is what a healthy downtown, a successful downtown looks like going forward. And we're really looking at how we can create that right now with policy and of course with our housing creators. And ultimately, the established growth pattern that we've been doing since post-World War II, those type of sprawl model development, that's established, it's not going away. 83% of new growth in Sacramento region is going to be greenfield development. So, like I said, it's not going away, we're not advocating for that, but we are trying to bring that growth into the downtown, like tip the scale towards this type of growth, move the ball in that direction, and communicate a sense of urgency for it. So, that's what we do at Downtown Partnership. I like to say that we're, at the intersection of theory and practical design, and we're trying to engineer these type of conditions. Because ultimately, I'm lucky. I've gotten to achieve the dream of home ownership, but everyone in this room knows that that is fleetingly out of reach for people. So we really need to be strategic and thoughtful and creative about where we're bringing this housing growth. And I think that needs to be at our most location efficient places, where it's transit rich and opportunity rich and walkable and mixed use. So this is what we're doing at the state level. We're working with champions like Assemblymember Matt Haney. He chairs the Downtown Recovery Select Committee. And we work with our regional caucus, specifically Senate Majority Leader Angelique Ashby. And we're looking at strengthening the tools that could unlock development. Things like gap financing tools or EIFDs or tax incentives, anything that can actually make these projects pencil, because they're the most financially complex to build, but they're the most beneficial and sustainable for our communities. We work with our local partners at the city and the county. We're collaborating with city staff, our elected officials from all districts, downtown otherwise, and we're tracking their agendas and getting into the weeds and coming to these meetings and weighing in on them. And sometimes these policy decisions, these strategies to meet these needs are, supporting them, where those are good ideas. And sometimes it's pushing a little bit against it, because we have had experiences where the ideology, even though it's well-intended, it can have counterproductive reactions. So we're always kind of being that mindful eye of what are the unintended consequences, bringing in our experiences of that, and trying to make sure that we're always communicating an open for business mindset, because we want to bring more people to our neighborhood. We want to grow the business and grow the economic pie. And of course, we work with our industry partners. We work with chambers, we work with realtors, we work with housing creators themselves, and we're asking those kind of questions. How do we alleviate the barriers? Where are the pain points? What's working? What's not working? And we workshop that policy in real time. I like to think of it like urban chemistry, like we're trying to create the conditions for things to happen, for those positive reactions, like infill and mixed use. Because ultimately, I'm always having this conversation of the private sector, they're the housing creators. The public sector is not the housing creator, they don't build, but they do have a role here. The public sector's role is to create those conditions. They need to make sure that the private sector is confident to move in, to operate there, to invest and to scale their business. So it's easier said than done. It's endlessly challenging, but we are actively redirecting the growth that's been taking place in California pretty much by default. And that sprawl model development, it's a model that's not really serving us in the long run. I mean, again, there's the place for it, but we still want to tip the scale for the infill growth. What we can do is look at affordability. Again, big issue for California, for Americans overall. And we can engineer that affordability and by putting them near transit or making it walkable for them or bikeable for them. Because ultimately we can't just keep building additional lanes on the highway. We know we need to reduce our reliance on vehicles. And when we're doing this, we're not only building in the affordability, but of course we're helping our climate goals. But it's important to note that car expense is the second highest expense in your household. It's roughly about $10,000 a year to own a vehicle in California. So if you can just walk, bike, or take transit, you're giving yourself a nice little $10,000 bonus. We need to build smarter. I know we need to build housing at all levels of affordability, but what's really missing is the missing middle. We want to target specifically the workforce housing. So from the private sector side, that's looking at how we can engineer affordability in the design of the home without public subsidies. So things like building smaller footprints or smaller square footages into the residences themselves, or maybe dorm style living. Of course, removing parking, which is a big deal for people even who live on the grid. I can't believe there's no parking, but it's actually a good thing because it actually forces someone to learn how to live their lifestyle differently. On the missing middle, it's a much different conversation from the public sector side, and it can be a bit challenging because we're at a critical point where we really need to bring in new housing, but existing homeowners are fearful. And I've been there, I've seen a lot of those examples in Sacramento. But ultimately, from the public sector side, we're trying to push those conversations as to, hey, where can we change the regulations as far as what the house is supposed to look like? How can we change the zoning so we can just open the floodgates for these things to happen? And of course, we should be looking at the trends too. 80% of net new households are gonna be single couples. That's because fewer people are having kids. Yep. So ultimately, we need to be building for that type of, we need to be facilitating from the public side. It's facilitating that type of production, not being fearful of it, and ultimately recognizing that this type of production is actually a recipe, a proven recipe for success. We can look at cities from European cultures and see that they have that 15-minute city is what they call it. So they're 15 minutes away from all the services that you would need right there. I mean, you can close your eyes and imagine what a vibrant city looks like. And I'm sure it's a busy sidewalk or a busy park in New York, or a bustling cafe in Paris, as Michael wanted to point out earlier. So vibrancy here by bringing more people in. We should prioritize infill and transit-oriented development, TOD. We need to basically offer any type of incentive so that we're flagging to this market that we want you to build here. And of course, we'd love to see those incentives that are monetary, that actually have those gains for our housing creators. Maybe it's a fee deferral or a fee reduction, but budgets are really tight right now. So there's other things you can do. You can do non-monetary type of prioritization. You can basically signal, okay, I'm gonna prioritize this project when the application comes into the queue. It's not gonna be everyone at the same time. We're gonna handpick this. We're gonna have, elevated coordination and increased staffing. We're gonna put you first and we're gonna fast track you. And we need to prioritize catalytic projects, whether they're housing or not. Catalytic projects are major projects that serve as anchors in your districts, and they create gravity. They actually stimulate extra production and extra development, and they create ripple effects, or it's kind of called a halo effect. We've seen that in Sacramento. This is the Golden One Center. It's been absolutely transformational for our region, but we're seeing it in other places. We've got here, this is the rail yards. Our Wilton Rancheria tribe is building actively a professional soccer stadium. This is Cap Mall. This is where the Sac State is proposing an additional campus, bringing higher education directly into our district. And other healthcare investments like Kaiser Permanente and the rail yards and others. And I mention these because whether they're housing or not, they bring jobs, they bring activity, they bring nightlife, they bring culture, and all of those things support housing and vice versa. So that it's all equally important. We can't work on this independently. We want it all. I got one more thing for you to share with you tonight, and that's about why density matters for our fiscal sustainability. So this is a graph that kind of shows that essentially high density is the highest ROI. Talking about sales tax revenue, property tax revenue, and transit occupancy tax. That's the TOT, or hotel tax, heads and beds. And you can see from this graph that revenue spikes in those density areas as compared to our neighbors in that low density sprawl model development. Just fewer people out there, fewer things to do, and not generating as much revenue. That might be obvious for this group, but what's less talked about is the cost. The cost of these services, things like fire or police or parks, or even just services like water and sewer. With the low density type of development, you actually have fewer people who are being serviced, but longer roads that need to be maintained, longer sewer lines that have to be maintained. And you have fewer people, fewer sources that are actually feeding into that pot and kind of keeping it balanced. So part of why I remind people that density matters is that it literally subsidizes other parts of the city. If you can have a healthy, dense downtown area that's actually generating that high revenue, that is going to not only allow everyone else to have the traditional single-family home that we don't want to take away from, but it allows us to really rechart our path. Because part of the reason why our budgets across the city and the county and the state are so much under pressure is because of our development patterns, and we need to rewrite that ship. So that's where I'm gonna leave you all tonight. I hope this inspires you that your downtown's important no matter where you're from, and again, no matter where you live or where you work, because it's most sustainable economically, environmentally, and socially.
We'll take a couple of questions, probably at the end, because I know the bus is coming. So if you guys have any questions, yes, Madeline will stick around here, okay? So our last speaker